What's up, everyone? Welcome back. We're going to talk about pre-spawn bass fishing now. Some of my favorite baits. We'll talk about them right now. Thanks for watching. As you know by now, this is all about bass fishing. All these videos talking about tackle. We talk about my fishing experiences, do a lot of reviews, and then once in a while some tips. And that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to talk about bass fishing during the pre-spawn. Now, that is kind of a vague term because once the bass spawn, you know, they go through their whole summer, they have all winter, then it's pre-spawn. I mean, even if it's a week away, if it's 2 months away, that's still kind of pre-spawn. It's just there's little mini seasons in between. But just in general, you know, the few weeks before the bass spawn, when they first start to move up towards spawning, which happens at different times depending on where you live. I used to live in Washington State. You know, those fish would spawn May, June, even into July. When I lived in Nevada, it was March and into April. And I used to live in Florida. Really, I've lived in a lot of different places, it seems like. But in Florida, you know, that's a January, February thing. Now I'm in Texas, and it's a February, March, April kind of thing. It just depends on the lake, the region, the climate, obviously, so take that for what it's worth. Those few weeks before it spawns really varies depending on where you live. But there are themes. Out of all those places that I've lived, there are things that happen and there's baits that will catch them. I'm going to show you some of my favorites for the pre-spawn period, and I'd love to know yours as well. So comment below, let me know which ones I'm missing, but I'm going to show you some that have worked for me in just about all these places that I've lived and all the places I've traveled to fish. I've fished all the time all over the country, and I have a lot of experience fishing during the pre-spawn. It's a great time to be fishing. Those fish are about as fat as they're going to be all year. You know, sometimes they get a little bit heavier when they're feeding up in the fall, but generally that is the best chance to catch a really big bass. And there's a lot of different ways to catch them. So I'm gonna run through some different baits, some of my favorites, why I like them, and I will put links down below for you to check them out if you're interested. But let's just jump right into it. Number one for me is a ChatterBait. I love a ChatterBait. It is something I have tied on all the time, no matter where I go, but it is such a deadly bait during the pre-spawn. Now I use a lot of different ChatterBaits. You know, I use the jackhammer, of course. You know, I've used the Thunder Cricket, codfish on all these different ones, but I'm really liking this one. This is the Evo. It's a little cheaper version from Z-Man. You know, and just because it's cheaper doesn't mean it's bad. It still has a really good action. It's got the head stamped on there, or the weight stamped right on the head. Comes in some really good colors, including these painted blade versions. I got a spunk shad on there. It's a really good single tail trailer, just like a little pintail, but it's hard to beat green pumpkin. I mean, you could get into the fire craw. You could throw all these different colors. Black and blue can be really good, but if you had to pick one, or if I had to pick one, it would be green pumpkin. It is a universal color that looks like a bluegill. It is deadly during the pre-spawn. Really, after the spawn, it is just something you should always have tied on. A ChatterBait is a great bait to cover water and to catch fish. Next one is a jig. Again, this could be pre-spawn, post-spawn, middle of summer, anytime. A jig is really hard to beat. I like a solid black color a lot of times, which may surprise people. I don't have any flake or any flash or anything like that. Black is a color that stands out really well in dirty water, but it also looks really natural in clear water. So even if you live up north, like I used to live in Washington State, crystal clear water at a lot of those lakes, this is still a very natural color. But then if you go fish somewhere dirty, it still stands out. So it's really the best of both worlds. And not a lot of people throw a solid black bait with no flake, black trailer. You know, this is just a 1/2 ounce jig. It's a tungsten jig, and then a black super chunk on the back of it. With this jig, you can pitch it to laydowns, to stumps, to docks, all those places that bass will hide eventually to spawn. You know, as they're gearing up to spawn, that's where they're gonna be staging. Can't beat a jig, and again, try that black. Moving on to something else, going a little bit faster, we're gonna talk about crankbaits. These are two of my favorites. These are Balsa crankbaits. There's a flat-sided bait and more of a square bill style, but I really like that Balsa action in the pre-spawn. If you're not familiar with Balsa baits, they have a lot different action than most plastic baits. There's a lot more buoyancy to them because it's wood. So if you bang into cover and let it, you know, stop, it's gonna float differently than plastic. You know, a lot of the good crankbaits now that are plastic kind of have that Balsa-like action, but I think, in my opinion, it's hard to beat a Balsa bait during the pre-spawn, and red is a great color. These are both from PH Customs. Can't remember the exact names. I think this is Phil's Secret. I can't remember for sure. Then the flat side right there, but flat side when the water's cold up to about 50-ish, and then after that, a rounded, more aggressive bait. It's kind of how I approach it. The next one may surprise you, but one of my favorite baits during the pre-spawn is a frog. You know, most people think of frogs as a great bait for the summer because they are. You know, it's really good when you're fishing over grass, things like that. But a frog is deadly when fish are thinking about spawning. You know, it's something that they're not used to, is something above them. So I have 3 different frogs here, 3 different sizes. You know, this is kind of just your standard frog. This is a little bit smaller one, and then this tiny one. I really have done very good on this in the pre-spawn, and even when the fish are spawning, even when the water was freezing. It's just something they're not used to, looking up. You know, they're looking for an easy meal, and most people are winding things or pitching things to them. A frog is really hard to beat during the pre-spawn. So try it. You know, I know you have some frogs. Try it before everyone else is doing it. And if you can get on that bite before everyone else, you can have some really good days with a frog. And don't be afraid of this little frog with these little hooks. This thing will catch them. Next, we got a jerkbait. This is kind of a more aggressive jerkbait. This is the I'm a Flit. So it is a louder jerkbait. It's just completely different than the Megabass Vision 110 that everyone throws. It's a 120 size. There's also a 100 size as well, but it's a more aggressive action, darting action. It's really good for the pre-spawn when those fish are looking for a meal. But really, any jerkbait's good for the pre-spawn period, you know, working on those areas that fish are using, moving into spawning. So like the points leading into pockets, things like that. Deeper dock piles, or deeper docks leading into a shallow spawning bait. Those sort of areas, a jerkbait is a really good way to do it. And with forward-facing sonar, it makes it so much easier to see what's following your bait, where the fish are, things like that. But try a different jerkbait than what a lot of people are using. This one also dives down slightly deeper than a 110, Vision 110. So just something different. And I really have caught a lot of fish on the I'm a Flit. And last one I'm gonna talk about is the brush hog style. This is actually a Strike King game hog. It's something I always have tied on in the pre-spawn and the spawn. It's really good. Just put it on a bullet weight, a hook, pitch it around all those same areas that I talked about with the jig, you know, the stumps, the dock pilings, all those sorts of areas. There's something about that style, all that flapping. It's kind of intrusive, aggressive. So a brush hog, a game hog, or even something like the Z-Man Gremlin, some sort of creature bait is a great option for the pre-spawn, and keep fishing it all the way through the spawn. I also like to dip the tails just with a little bit of chartreuse dye just to make it look more like a bluegill, but you don't have to do it. That's just kind of personal preference, something that's worked for me in all those places that I've lived. I really don't fish these very much except for right now. So I have a whole box full of them, and this is when I pull them out, right about now, and then I keep them until the fish are done spawning and the bluegill start spawning. It's great for the springtime. So those are my favorite baits for the pre-spawn. I'll try to do more of these for different periods of the year, kind of mix it in with the tackle videos. Let me know which baits am I missing for the pre-spawn period. Love to hear your thoughts. Maybe I just wasn't thinking of something, or maybe I'll try something new. So again, let me know, and thanks for watching.